Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here, and I just want to do a real quick video for the Path of Exile League launch announcement thing here, because a lot of people have been asking me about PoE if I plan to play it, and right off the bat, they did add the feature that pretty much would have to be added to the game in order for me to even consider playing, and that is asynchronous trade. Asynchronous trade is something that came like in PoE 2, and it's now going to be a thing in PoE 1 as well. So you have your merchant tabs. You'll be able to go and just like buy things from other players without having to meet up with them, without them having to be online. You can just go and like manage your merchant tab and like list things up for sale with Faustus. It's something that should be available after Act 6, and it's assuming that you can use the same tabs that you have from PoE 2 for merchant tabs, and this will be a lot easier to go and trade with people, which I think is pretty important. Now, this particular league is basically going to be Breach 2.0, and Breach was one of my more favorite leagues in the past. It did have a lot of issues, I felt, on the actual launch of the season. There was like the big issue with like you touch the breach and about 1 billion monsters just pop out of it and just instantly one-shot you. There's also a lot of issues with invisible enemies killing people nonstop. But they did kind of like fix a lot of these. And even though it's Breach 2.0, looks like they're going to have a couple of different things in here where it's not just like touch a breach, monsters come out. There's definitely still that, and it's definitely part of the core game. But there is some additional style stuff. So we do have the traditional like touch the breach expands, monsters pop out, you kill them. But then once you fill up the meter, it seems like the breach kind of like stabilizes, as breach stabilize, and it kind of spawns a boss that you can go fight and get some loot from. And there's like no timer on this, which is something I thought was pretty cool, because especially in the original OG Breach League, there's always this problem where like Chayula would pop up at the very last second of a breach, and then they would just dip right out as the breach closed. And I definitely had a few friends who never actually got to kill Chayula for the challenge because A, they never spawned, and B, they, if they did spawn, they don't have enough time to kill it. So they kind of did change and update that. And also there's different types of breaches you're going to interact with. Sometimes they're going to be like these ruins, basically, which you can just walk right through. You don't have to click any doors or go through any mazes. You just kind of like evaporate them as you go through. And there's going to be some different things there, including like what seems like some sort of OG breach boss type of thing. We're going to fight through tons of enemies, and then at the end of it, there should be like an actual boss fight. Looks like you can even fight multiple bosses at the same time. This looks like Tool and Esh together. Who knows exactly how that's all going to work out. And apparently they redid a lot of the boss animations, and they're like their own actual original bosses, and not like just slapping the same old boss in there, which I think is very good. Now, this also comes with a massive crafting system, as you would guess from PoE 1. We basically have a tree for crafting, which is very different than what we've seen before. And this tree, of course, comes with its own passive tree. And you can pretty much invest into this in order to cause loot to form out of these little sections. Things from like the new seasonal kind of stuff to currencies to farming for rares of specific types. So you can, like the example they gave is you can like farm a dex boot that has movement speed more likely on it, stuff like that, which I think is pretty neat. And so like once the tree fills out, you can put this like graft item wound thing, and you can go and take these wound gifts and basically drop them in there, and it will consume some resources to pop out a reward. I'm sure that farming for the resources is going to be something people are going to do, farming for the things that can grow, and also like setting up your tree a specific way. Definitely going to be, a lot of like meta different stuff going on there for sure. They also added these new things called graphs. And these are basically like little arms that are going to be put onto your character's back, and they're going to have all sorts of different effects. We kind of go and look at some of them here on the actual announcement. So like this particular one here gives you the Great Avalanche skill. So whenever you use an offering skill, you basically have more minions to pop out that can apply brittle. It's kind of neat. There's also one over here that has a 20-second cooldown, and it gives you a 8-second buff whenever you take hits for your life. It basically pops up a kind of shield for you and causes projectiles to fire out and do a whole ton of fire damage. And you can use like special type of currency to roll the modifiers on these to like increase the rarity, increase all the stuff, the typical Path of Exile crafting mumbo jumbo stuff. And these could be potentially pretty neat. Definitely just like another 2 slots for you to actually put your gear into. They said you get one like pretty much right off the bat, and you can unlock a second one. Now, some of these do come with their own button that you do have to activate, which is a little bit concerning if these are like the best ones, because I feel like that's a little bit like putting PoE 2, press a ton of buttons style combat into PoE 1. We have seen that several of them are just automated and just go along with what you're already doing, which I hope is kind of the majority of them. So like this one, for example, here, return to dust, periodically target rare and unique enemies, and calls forward massive hands, which just slam down, dealing damage to them. And so, this is just kind of good. There's this other ones here that just do a whole bunch of different things. And I'm sure there'll be like some graphs that are incredibly overpowered or for targeting specific builds. And definitely people will do stuff with them. Also, there's just like a ton of like just normal vibes to me of like old OG Breach with this, with just like bringing back basically an old season, which I kind of like, especially because they now have all the loot just get vacuumed to the center, which I think is pretty good. Now they also have the ability for you to I don't know how to describe this, but basically you're changing one of the modifiers on a unique to be a random foul-born unique mod. And so these can be like any line basically can turn into something kind of crazy. So like the mana on hit turns into insufficient mana doesn't prevent your bow attacks. They showed another one where the projectile speed turned into AoE. You get like Chaos Resist on your Foulborn Gold Rim, or Elemental Overload here on Zoph's Blood. I'm sure there's going to be some absolutely just bonkers uniques combinations where like you have some sort of weird thing that's going to enable some sort of build. But I'm also going to guess that a lot of these are just going to brick the item. Probably the large majority just kind of brick the item. And you can get multiple lines going. In terms of new skills, it kind of looks like it's a wand kind of season. So if I can do kind of like kinetic blast that kind of targets the ground, which is kind of interesting. And it does really kind of seem like there is multiple skills that are really aiming towards wands here. So you have this one, it's kind of like mines on the ground kind of. I think you have to walk over these, which could potentially be bad. They also added in this kinetic wall that allows you to drop down a wall like behind the boss. And then when you hit the wall, it bounces back and targets enemies. So it could potentially make things like kinetic blast like really, really good for single target. It kind of just gives me vibes from like older builds in PoE's history. And then we also got some like a fire bow type of skills where you're like laying down these like fire arrows. They did say that you have to step close to them for them to explode. So you probably do need to be rather tanky. It's not going to be like an off-screening type of skill. It's also like very visually crazy, which I don't enjoy. They also added some supports to like really make these giant crazy storm tornadoes and stuff. And so it really does seem like this is going to be a ranged meta this season, especially because Breach tends to always favor builds that can hit like all corners of the breach at the same time. We also have passive trees for your ascendancy, where you're going to have a secondary ascendancy type of thing. It's kind of like a D4's boss powers type of system where you can kill different bosses in the game and you can get ascendancy trees from them, and you use the same ascendancy trees that you points that you use for your normal trees, but you can also use them on these new types of ascendancy trees, which I believe they're calling bloodline classes. And so, for example, like the chaos one here gives you a whole bunch of vol skill stuff, and there's a whole bunch of different points you can put into here, just kind of like to empower that. Whether or not you could use multiple bloodlines isn't really clear, but I could definitely see people using some of these. Next up, they also have some new Uber fights, all of the like 16.5 bosses where you have to like block the lasers and stuff like that with clever positioning. They basically just made all of these fights a lot harder and a lot more like bullet hell like. So instead of like blocking the lasers hitting the statues now cause the lasers to go absolutely crazy. So you kind of want to keep the statues active all of the time, so you're not having to deal with the lasers hitting the statues, which I didn't particularly like these fights. It kind of just felt like if you had enough damage, you just like skip all the mechanics. And if you didn't have enough damage, sometimes it'd just be like really annoying to do the fight. And so we'll see how those kind of shake out. I don't even know if I'll get that far. For quality of life stuff, they basically made it so that if you're doing heist stuff, all the heist guys start off at max level, so you don't have to level them up anymore. You still have to gear them up and all that stuff. I still really don't like heist, so I probably won't be interacting with this at all. They made it so some of the refunding stuff, like on the Atlas passives, you can refund all points, you can use gold, and you can do the exact same on your normal passive tree, which is pretty cool. And then there's also a thing where you can like level up all of your skill gems at once by pressing a level up all button, which I wish every single game that has level up skills like TLI, for example, had this particular thing. That would just be so great. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the announcement. I don't have the patch notes yet. Just kind of want to go through it. I don't really want to go through all the patch notes. If we end up playing, I'm probably going to be playing like some sort of wand skill, maybe. It kind of seems like it's leaning that direction. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you think is going to be OP? What build should I check out? I really don't know too much about like PoE 1 meta all that much anymore, but I'm willing to check it out. Hope you guys have a good one. We'll see you again soon.